Hi, welcome to the Regenerate Media Podcast. I'm Skylar, your host, and today I'm here with my friend and writer Ryan Hagen, who has been recognized by the UN, by TEDx, by LinkedIn, and Harvard, and who recently published or is about to go into is about to publish the hard copy version of his book, Your Guide to Climate Action: How to Move Beyond Your Footprint and Make a Big Impact. Climate activist Bill McKibben calls the book incisive, concise, and eminently useful. He says, read it and get to work. So, Ryan, thanks so much for being here today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it as well. It should be fun.
Sweet. And, here we are close to home and excited that the Media Factory is helping us produce this. To make things difficult, I'm going to ask you a two-pronged first question.
Hit me.
One, who is your book for? And then two, how did you come to write your book?
Yeah, so the book is for anyone who cares about climate change and wants to do something about it, like wants to increase their positive impact. So, it's anyone who's worried about climate change and ecological breakdown and who's scared, alarmed, overwhelmed, like wherever you are on that spectrum, if you care and you want to be doing more, you want to be doing something to help, this book is for you. Whether you're like brand new to climate action and haven't really done much before, or you've been working on this for a decade or more, like there's gonna be bits and pieces that are gonna be useful no matter where you are on your climate journey.
And sorry, I'll make you do the second part of that question after I just briefly say that was my experience as somebody that has, been working on related issues for, 15 years, say. There's a lot in this book, and I really appreciated the way it was all laid out. And now to the second part of the question, what was your journey toward writing the book?
Yeah, so how far back do you want me to go? You want my like whole climate journey, or just sort of like what most imminently like led up to the book?
I really was inspired by your story in the more long format.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into detail, but yeah, give me your climate journey.
Yeah. Okay. So this all started for me back when I was 20, like 2012. And, climate crossed my radar when I was in college. That was the first time I really heard about it. And the first time I heard about it, I kind of was like, what is this thing? Is this real? Kind of sounds like a big deal, but like I got stuff going on, sort of, people to see, things to do. And I think maybe 6 months later, I had just had this like summer internship I really didn't like. I was like, okay, I need to like figure out what I'm doing with my life. I need to find like a meaningful career. And climate crossed my radar again. I watched An Inconvenient Truth and was just full on like, oh my gosh, like why isn't everyone talking about this? Why aren't we doing something more about this? And yeah, so I picked up a sustainability minor to add on to like an econ major. Went down the rabbit hole of just like nerding out on how to minimize my own footprint and started trying to find like a job in climate, which I did get out of school. I landed a job in clean tech, worked there for a few years, felt like I could be doing more still, just like an analyst at this company. And then, yeah, so I left and I started writing just because I felt like I had things to say that I didn't hear most people talking about climate or actions or solutions in the way that I was thinking about them. And just sort of figured, even if only my friends and family read this, like at least I tried and like maybe it'll help somebody. But yeah, so I started a newsletter. It was slow for the first like year and a half, but then it really took off.
I did. I'll brag for you. You got to the point where this newsletter had more than 200,000 people. And
Yeah, it like really took off on LinkedIn, surprisingly, of all places. But yeah, so I was just
sorry, you said where?
on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. It took off on LinkedIn, but also another element of that is you said 150 countries
yeah. So it's
around, people
everywhere,
all around the world are tuning into
which was
this.
really cool.
Yeah.
And that's actually like what kept me going because I turned this into a nonprofit. It was all about inspiring, educating, empowering people to act on climate change. But like hearing from people and how it was helping them was like really motivating for me. Um, but yeah, so it was really just me like following my nose on what I thought was most interesting and most important for people to know, and then started a podcast, got to talk to dozens of experts, and my whole thing was like, how can we, how can everyone else like play a bigger role in this? Like not just minimizing your footprint, but how can we like change the systems we're a part of? Um, and so, yeah, that's what the newsletter was about. I did that for 5 years, and the nonprofit was called Crowdsourcing Sustainability. That ended for a variety of reasons, and then once it shut down, this was end of 2023. I just spent 5-6 years doing this and learning all this and writing about it and researching and talking to hundreds of people. And I just felt like I needed to put it all in one place. Because like people do find old newsletters, but like, it's not often, and they're all just like piecemeal. And so I was like, I need to put all this in one place, build on it, and put it into something that people can like pick up and read or listen to. So yeah, that's how the book came about, and it's all about empowering people and giving us like the support and the tools and the resources and the ideas and the frameworks that we need to help build the world that we want to live in, something that's safer, healthier, and more just.
Sweet. And I think your point that, for example, for you, it's not just a book about minimizing your footprint, but it covers so many dimensions of solving the climate crisis. And I think that's part of what was so appealing to me about it. And, again, just the fact that you managed to put this all into one place makes it significant. And, I think I told you before, it's like even me holding all of these different ideas in my mind, it was almost a relief that these all exist in one place. I'm like, oh yeah, here's this, body of work that collects all these ideas. So I found that really helpful.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. And so now I'm going to take you back to sort of a big picture question that I am kind of interested in. What is the climate? What is this climate? What is the thing that we're trying to protect?
Yeah, so like the very big picture, you're asking like, what is it? Why does it matter? Kind of thing.
Yeah, what is it? Why does it matter? Yeah, I think my perception is that in very kind of superficial mainstream discourse about climate change, it's confusing as to what we're even trying to save, how it got this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it can be confusing because we just take it for granted. And I think of climate change and like ecosystem health as kind of hand in hand. They're the context in which everything else takes place, and they're the foundation of what our civilization was and is built on. And so if you think about it kind of just from like first principles, what are our basic needs? Air we breathe, water we drink, food, safe places to live. All of those depend on healthy ecosystems and a stable climate. If you think about just our food, like that comes from plants, like that's the base level of this thing. And it might be easier to think of them needing like healthy ecosystem and stable climate more than we do. But if you take out that leg of like our agricultural system, whether that's because drought and they don't get enough water, or because a region where food is grown gets too hot or there's too many heat waves, or the jet stream is wavier now because of climate change, that can send like cold snaps down and like freeze crops. Like they can die in all sorts of different ways, but we can't take sunlight and turn it into food. We can't take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn it into oxygen. Like we rely on plants for pretty much everything. And that's just one example of like how climate and ecosystems are the foundation of our basic needs. Shelter is another pretty obvious one. If you think about climate change, it's getting hotter. That's melting the ice at the poles faster and faster. And warmer water also is just like, it expands more, so it just kind of is bigger if it's warmer. But so if you think about all this ice melting, we're projected to have many feet of sea level rise depending on how quickly we get to zero emissions, and that's going to change coastlines. It's like literally going to be redrawing the map of our countries and states, and most cities, most of the population is on coastlines. And so like safe places to live is also directly impacted by climate. And just one more quick thing on that, which I think is helpful for people who are, if you're talking to someone who's like less inclined to believe that the climate is going to impact us now, just look at the insurance companies. Like they're reevaluating how risky different places to live are, and they're jacking up prices, and they're pulling out of places in California and Florida and other places around the world because they know what they're seeing in their data and their bottom lines is that they can't keep making money insuring these places unless the prices are really high. And sometimes they're like, this isn't worth it at all, and they just leave. And one last thing I'll say, I think it's helpful. You hear the numbers of climate change and global heating, and it's like we're trying to stop the planet from heating 1.5 degrees, which we're already at right now. But say 2 degrees, we're trying to prevent heating to that limit. And you're like, okay, 2 degrees, that's like 4-ish something Fahrenheit. And like it's easy to think of that between like, what's the difference between a 60-degree day and a 64-degree day? And you're like, oh, like that sounds nice. But it's way more accurate to think about it as like a 2-degree or 4-degree fever. Like if you had a fever that was that temperature, you'd be bedridden. And if you had it for more than a few days, and the earth is going to have this heating for centuries probably, again, depends on what we do in the future, but like it's mostly locked in. And so it's going to be for a long time. And if we had that same temperature, that same fever for more than a few days, like we're in the hospital. Like our body is not functioning the way it's supposed to be. So that's kind of like the high level, big overview of how I think about it.
Yeah, I like that. And, you started by saying that the climate, and you might be able to help me again, but, ecological integrity go hand in hand. And both that civilization is fundamentally dependent on a stable climate.
Yeah.
And all of these other species are dependent on a stable climate. And yeah, I love the metaphor of the temperature in the human body, that this stability is both produced by all of the interactions of these species and necessary for our existence in that way.
Totally. And I'll add one more quick thing, because something that still isn't as well known as it should be. Like people say the climate has always changed, and that's true. And for starters, we know that because climate scientists have told us that. And they're also the people telling us that what's happening now is like really bad and caused by human activity. But the key thing to understand is that this is happening because of greenhouse gas emissions, and most of those are happening because of how we power our society and make our food, and treat the our ecosystems. And it's not that things are changing; it's the pace of change. Um, the temperature is rising at least 10 times faster than it did. It might be the amount of CO2 that's coming out is like 10 times higher than if you look back at the deadliest mass extinction event. Like things are changing rapidly, like way too fast. And if it was very, very slow, like ecosystems could have a chance to adapt, but it's happening way too fast for ecosystems to have any sort of chance to adapt.
Yeah.
So that's like the key thing to really understand is the pace is not conducive to our ecosystems
Yeah,
or our infrastructure.
right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's like, of course, things have changed throughout time, but if you have ecological communities that can change with that temperature change or weather change, then you're okay. But if you don't, then you're not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like how bad is it? And I think like we hear these reports and we see that we have to reach certain targets that we're apparently missing. Like, are we just on our current trajectory? What can we expect in terms of climate change? Like, what kind of consequences are we looking at?
So, I mean, the bad news is there's already a lot of really bad things locked in. The good news is there's still like this vast difference between the best and worst case scenarios. And so I'd say we don't exactly know the specific path we're on because so much depends on what we do now and this year and in the next 5 to 10 years. But generally speaking, like the sea levels are going to keep rising. It's going to keep getting hotter. It's going to get harder to grow our crops. There's going to be more droughts, just like there's going to be more fires and smoke. Hurricanes are going to keep getting more intense. So like, it's going to keep getting worse until we get to zero emissions. And the goal in the Paris Agreement is to get there by 2050. Realistically, we need to try to get there earlier than that. Either one is a massive undertaking. And that's why we need all hands on deck, really. And I mean, that's also why I wrote the book, because I truly believe like everyone has a lot more power than we think we do. And we can all change and influence the systems that we're a part of. And when you need to change every town and city and school and company, like the only people who can actually make those changes are the people who belong to those places. And we all belong to those places. So I think we all have a responsibility to try and do our best for ourselves and, everybody and everything we love on this earth.
Cool. And I again, I found it very meaningful that your book focused on all of these, different communities. Like you're saying, you have your local community, you have your businesses. We're a part of all of these webs of social relationships, and we have power within each of these. And, as we hear all of this doom and gloom, this message that you're bringing of this power we have is like, for me, it was something I needed to hear when I read it. And so I appreciate that. Before we get into your solutions, I actually have one more question about the climate side of things, the science side. People are talking about, there seems to be so much uncertainty in the climate models. And it strikes me from the perspective of, I've been studying biodiversity and the collapse of biodiversity, and also the uncertainty revolving around what happens when we lose different species. And in my mind, there is this really fundamental uncertainty. We know that these stable ecosystems and stable relationships have got us to this point, but do we really know what happens when we lose some of these species? And, to your point about how fast the change is happening, that same change is happening when it comes to extinctions. When it comes to uncertainty in our climate models, how can we understand that? Does that uncertainty mean we might be just fine, or could it mean, does it go in both directions? What's the deal with that uncertainty?
Yeah, so my understanding is there's uncertainty in like the details, but not really the big broad strokes.
Okay.
Like if you look at, is it Exxon or Shell? I think Shell. Like they had scientists back in the 70s and 80s. These big oil companies had their scientists look into this. And this is true of most of the predictions back then. But there's like a specific report you can find that Shell had from the late 80s where they estimated the amount of CO2, like if we kept doing business as usual by the year 2019 and what the temperature would be by 2019. And they were basically spot on. I think, if anything, the models have been a bit conservative on how slow some of these things would be, like how like things are happening faster than they expected. I'm a little less familiar with the ecosystem side of things, and I think that's actually harder to model because that seems way more. There's a lot more details and variables and probably more unknowns than just like straight what's the temperature going to be, like how quickly is the sea level going to rise. That one's actually also tricky though because they don't know how these massive ice sheets actually melt, and it's probably going to melt in a much more nonlinear fashion than what like a model is going to spit out. But yeah, so I'd say the scientists are very clear on the big picture of what's happening and how bad it is, and the uncertainty is more in the details and around like what are we going to do, like how quickly are emissions going to get to zero, because if you don't know how quickly that's going to happen, you don't know like what the temperature is going to be or how quickly how bad things will get. So I'd say that's where most of the uncertainty is.
That's interesting. I think you spoke to this in your book. Did you use the phrase keystone species, that we humans can be such an impactful species?
I don't think I said it in those words, but that idea is in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit as we move into thinking about our role in ecosystems and the climate?
Yeah. And you can add to this because you might know more on this part than me. But my thinking goes to Lila June Johnson, who has a really good TED Talk on this. But her research is basically on past, like indigenous ways of caring for the land, and how if we were to change our relationship with the land, we think of ourselves as like harming the land, and so much of what people think of as like sustainability is doing less bad, like just getting to neutral, and we really need to switch to doing like as much good as we possibly can. Like we don't have to have a negative impact on our ecosystems. We can have like a positive one. And again, like I don't know the details on this really, but indigenous people often use fire to like improve the health of the land that they're living on. I think there was a big like food forest somewhere on the East Coast that was managed by indigenous people, and like they would tend to it so that like it was a healthy ecosystem, like diverse crops spread out properly. Like we could manage and cultivate and care for land in a way that's good for it and good for us. We don't just have to be like harmful or neutral. We can have a positive impact.
Yeah, I love that. Like, it seems like historically, environmental movement was sort of concerned with basically reducing our harm, and obviously that's really important. But understanding that we are part of nature and we can change nature, and that doesn't necessarily have to be negative, seems so important as we have, are in a place of needing to make changes.
Yeah.
So that might not lead directly into all of the solutions you're talking about, but will you give us an overview of just some of the solutions that you lay out in your book?
Are you talking like what people can do or like the big what the world needs to do kind of solution?
Okay, let's do this. How about first tell us, what do we have to do as a society to
Yeah.
even get close? And then how do you take that and turn that into a guide for an individual that's trying to assess their own
Cool.
solution space?
All right, we'll see if I can remember the list exactly from the book. But the like global solutions, I think of it as protecting and restoring ecosystems, increasing our efficiency and reducing unnecessary consumption. We need to electrify all our machines. Basically, like how do we get off fossil fuels? So electrifying all our machines, that's our stoves, it's our cars. It's some people have like dryers that run on natural gas. It's water heaters. It's furnaces, boilers. So with all these electrified machines, then powering them with clean electricity, so getting off coal, natural gas, and really ramping up solar and wind, and some other clean energy technology, and then investing in girls' education and like women's health. And then there's a couple others. We need to move towards a circular economy. So like not wasting things. Like there should be no more waste. We should always be recycling and reusing. So that's the general gist. There's probably like one or two other things. That's like the high level of what we need to do. Oh, regenerative agriculture is a huge one. That's like a quarter of emissions is how we are making our food.
I heard once that half of, this was years ago, and so it's probably changed since, but that half of the soil carbon stock that had built up on the Earth's soil over eons is now in the atmosphere due to our agriculture. So
I believe it. Yeah, we need to change how we grow our food for sure. And soil's been really underappreciated in its role, both in food and like the atmosphere and carbon. So that's kind of the high level of like solutions, what we need to do if you like really tried to boil it down. And then, you might think of as an individual, like how do I help with any of that?
Right, because like I think of all those solutions and I'm like, yeah, that'd be great if the whole world could.
Yeah.
But what do I do? Yeah, so anyways, keep going.
Yeah, and so, there's the personal side of things where you can start to electrify the machines in your home. You can try to use your car less and walk. You can eat less meat, try to go vegetarian or vegan, and you can switch your money to banks that aren't going to invest in fossil fuel projects and there are banks now that will put your money into like clean energy solutions. Same with your investments. Those are two that people don't think about a lot, but that's all the personal footprint stuff. You can donate to nonprofits working on this.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, part of like your early journey really revolved around the personal footprint work.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So were you like engaging in all these things and
Yeah.
trying them out? And what was that like for you?
Stressful. It's really hard to, when you realize that pretty much everything we do is harming life on the planet, it's like a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. And I think it's easier to ignore it and not think about it. We could talk about like defense mechanisms and eco emotions later. But so like, I think what's most important and what I've come to realize is that we all exist in this broken system. And it's not our fault that we were born into it. And it's really just about doing our best to improve it. And I try to not sweat the small stuff too much while like always doing everything I can. So it's that balance. Everyone's line is going to be different, but it's like, what's the balance that works for you? So like doing my best and continuing to like try to improve over time and not just focusing on my personal footprint, but like, this is the most important part. How do I help change the systems around me? And so you got all the personal footprint stuff that we just talked about. Then you got the company you work at. How can you help change those policy and investment decisions that are being made there? The town or city you live in. How can you help change those policy and investment decisions? The school you go to or went to. You could get into activism. You can help elect climate champions at every level of government. There's so many ways that we can all get involved, and it's about finding the ones that make the most sense to you. I think while also getting out of your comfort zone, because we all need to get out of our comfort zones right now because we're in an emergency.
So like in your book, you really kind of break it down almost into a step-by-step process. Like I'm thinking of, I think one of the early pages in the chapter about the solutions, you say, okay, here's what you're good at. You're going to be able to say this better than I, so maybe I'll just botch it for now. But here's what you're good at. Here's what's good for your community and the climate, and you're helping people find their path in this world, and like you're giving the specifics. All right, this is the way you measure that. This is the information on this. This is like who you are going to have to reach out to, and like you really lay it out.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's not a question, but
yeah, no, in the book, I tried to make it as easy as possible for people to wrap their head around like what the most effective actions are that you can take. Part 3 is the top 10 most effective actions in my mind. Laying it out step by step, like here's why this matters, here's the impact it can have, and here's the blueprint, the step by step on how to actually do it, and resources and organizations you can reach out to for help. The part you're referring to is like the first chapter in that section. And there's this awesome Venn diagram that Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson put together. And I think it's also based off Ikigai, the Japanese concept. But the idea is to make this Venn diagram with 3 circles. One is what brings you joy? What are you good at? And what work needs doing. And it's the intersection of those 3 things that you should really start to think about as like the climate action that you can like really focus on and invest time and energy into. And another key thing I think is one of those circles is the work that needs doing. And you can kind of analyze your own spheres of influence in that. And so in the book, I have a chart for my own spheres of influence, and it's like, this is the y-axis is greenhouse gas emissions. The x is sort of like my spheres of influence. So one is my personal footprint, and the amount of emissions from that is like 7 tons, something like that annually. Then I looked at my old company, Enernoc, and that was like 1,200 people, maybe 15,000 tons of emissions annually. A lot, way bigger than the footprint. But also nothing compared to the school I went to, which was close to like 70,000 tons, Villanova, 6,000 students. And that is way smaller than like the city that we're in right now, Burlington, which is 480,000 tons of emissions. And you compare that to the state, Vermont's like 8 million tons. And the company that bought my old company is this like multinational utility, and they're like 80 million tons. And so you just like see the scale of these kind of mid to big size systems and organizations that we're all a part of. And you can start to be like, okay, like, what's the best bang for my buck in terms of energy, time? Where do I have the most relationships? Where do I have the most power to change something? And that sort of analysis, I think, is also helpful when figuring out, like, what should I do? Like answering that question. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like how you map that. I was reflecting as we were coming here, so the way that that your interventions on your very personal local level kind of ripple up the chain. And for example, you had started a podcast club that we were listening to and going through this process about how do we think about climate and how do we think about our grief with it. And one, that was just a very meaningful process to go through. I got a lot of joy from just meeting with people each week and having those discussions.
Yeah.
That's also the reason that we're here today, probably having this discussion, because we enjoyed those discussions. And maybe our discussions we have hit that next sphere of influence. So in some ways they kind of go together. Was my reflection.
Totally. Yeah. I think individual actions, like when you're working on your personal footprint, that is going to have some ripples, and we need those. I think we also just need to make sure we're also specifically focusing on these mid-sized systems that we're all a part of. But talking about it is actually something I didn't bring up in that list of actions, but that's kind of the fundamental one for all systemic change. Like, we need to be able to talk about this with each other. And like, as we both experienced in that pod club, and shout out to Jess Cerante, what's the name of it's called We Are the Great Turning with Joanna Macy. And I think there's a real desire for more conversations about this, because we don't talk about it enough, but it's on most people's minds and most people are worried about it. And we're kind of just like scared and shy to bring it up. And the book also has it's one of the longer chapters, like how to talk about this with people and have useful conversations. But it's like, we had these pod clubs, and we joked that it was climate group therapy, because it was just like cathartic to talk about these really heavy subjects that we normally don't voice around other people. But it's very validating to know you're not alone.
Also, before this discussion, I was doing some research about the benefits that people get just from taking action and by seeking community that's taking collective action. And we talked a little bit about climate grief and just, what it's like to be in that sort of fight or flight grief state response that so many of us are in, especially, either denial or helplessness when it comes to these massive global issues. And just, the research was basically suggesting just taking steps is really beneficial to our health, our mental health, our well-being, and certainly talking about it and that social element of it is so important. That was, I think, one of the things that really stood out to me about your book. And now I feel like I'm sort of giving away elements of it, but there's a lot more there. Is like, I'm like, yeah, like we are humans are what we are because we're cooperative, because we're social, because we communicate, because we write. All of this is really what defines, our power and the way we make meaning and what we've become here on the planet. And your book was just such a reminder of that, and a manual on the way to leverage that fundamental nature of humanity.
Yeah, totally. I think to the emotions piece that you brought up, and this doesn't get talked about nearly enough, Britt Ray was really influential in my chapter on this. But there's if you think about our emotions, they evolved to help keep us alive and reproducing. And when we think about our eco emotions, our climate grief or anxiety, whatever it may be, I think most of us, myself included, are in some kind of like soft denial about the situation we're in, like how bad it is. And part of that's helpful. Like you can't go through your day with every minute like thinking about how bad this is and how the future is really at risk and everything we love. But I think too many of us never actually give those feelings, those emotions, the light of day. Like we don't face them, we don't listen to them, we don't name them, we don't process them. And when you don't do those things, it's not healthy, and it kind of like it takes energy to suppress them. And so, like you said, when you take action, well, first, if you like listen to those emotions and take time to process them, and especially if you're doing it with people, that's really helpful. If you name them and ask yourself why they're coming up, that's really helpful. If you connect it to like, oh, I'm worried about the climate and it's because I care about my family, my kids, grandchildren, or it's because I care about this beautiful state and how climate change is going to change it. Like when you connect it to your values, that's also kind of helpful. Just like understanding why these emotions keep coming up. But like you said, when you take action, you are helping to address the problem. And in my experience, those emotions are going to keep coming, but they might come less, or they might come less intensely because your brain also knows that you're acting on that problem. Like you're doing what you can to help solve it. And I think that's key because that's helping to switch like our energy. If you stop suppressing the emotions and ignoring them and instead face them, that energy that you were using to like suppress them and that cognitive dissonance to like ignore them, that can lessen or go away, and that frees you up to actually have more energy to do the things that address the problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm. That's a shift that seems like is fundamental to the climate shift. And I think for a lot of people around the world, that shift has probably happened, or at the very least, there are so many people around the world that are scared of climate change, that talk about climate change, that are doing what they can or already living in a way that is more compatible with a stable climate. And here in the US, that is a slower process. And part of that is because we've built a world and a lifestyle around not having to consider that. But I'm constantly hearing different ways in which the populace is actually more progressive than the politicians.
Yeah.
And the populace is more interested in saving the planet than the politicians. And, things change and movements matter, and we have power and we have impact. And, some of the research I was indicating or that I was reading was saying even, I saw one about if somebody was engaged in a political campaign, even if that person lost, they would still sleep better for the next months after.
Because they tried.
Because they tried. And so that's kind of how I feel about the climate.
Yeah.
And, or that's, one way you've influenced me to think about all of this. And so for now, let's call this part 1, if you're cool with it. And thanks so much for talking with me about these issues. Why don't you give a brief rundown on your book? How do people get it? Where is it available? When will it be available?
Yeah.
And
Heck yeah. So the ebook is available pretty much anywhere you get ebooks right now. It's on Amazon and Apple and Google Play and Kobo and Smashwords, the whole 9 yards. The print book should be available in the next couple weeks, somewhere around December 13th, 14th or so. Also around then, maybe within a week or so of that, you can start asking bookstores and libraries to see if they will get you a copy. But it should be in pretty much all the places where you think to get books. Yeah, and then the audiobook will be next year.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll look forward to that. Maybe you can record it here.
Yeah.
So here, this says not for resale because this is a
This is one of the
pre-publication
first
version.
3 copies, and because it's not published yet, like live, available in stores. That's why that's on there.
So this gray thing will not be covering this beautiful image, but here we are, your guide to climate action, how to move beyond your footprint and make a big impact by Ryan Hagen. Ryan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.